Good afternoon, this is Andy Hampton. I'm a potter with the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen, and I'm going to demonstrate today how I assemble a teapot. Sort of like this. You may be able to see over here that I've already thrown the pot and trimmed the bottom of all these teapots. And now I'm going to put the spout on first, and then I put the handle on. So first I center it on what's called a banding wheel. It has different bands so you know how to center the piece. And I slowly rotate that to see the imperfections on the top here. And I'll pick a point where I want the spout. I think I want the spout right about here. So if I want the spout here, then directly opposite of that is where I'm going to put the handle. Now when you make a teapot, you also make the lids. Let's throw them the same day. You also make the spouts. Let's pick this spout here. So the spout can't go directly like this on the pot, so it has to have some sort of an angle on it, and you don't want this whole distance here to be on the pot either. So you know that, and you know from experience that you have to create that angle when you cut it. So from experience, I know approximately what angle I want that to be. So the first thing I'll do is just cut that off at approximately the angle that I want. And I'll put it up there and I'll see if I like that angle. Obviously it's going to be cut off here because it's too long. I think I like that angle from experience. So now what I do is I center it over the mark that I made on the teapot. I center it, and then I draw a line all the way around it, which is marking where it's going to be on the pot. So there's two things I'm going to do here. I'm going to score this area here, and I'm going to put water on it so that when I put the spout on there, it's going to stick. And then the second thing I'm going to do, or actually the first thing I'm going to do, or the second thing I do after I score it, is I'm going to drill all the holes in here, which act as a strainer for the tea. So I've made what I call a scoring tool, which is just a piece of bamboo with some forks sort of cut in the end of it, and I'll just score that. It roughs up the surface so that the clay has a better possibility of sticking. Now I've scored that now, and I won't wet it until just a little bit before I put the spout on. So now I have another tool here, which is a piece of brass tubing stuck into a handle here. It's cut at an angle so you can poke it in and it'll punch a hole without making a big burst on the other side. So I'm going to make a pattern here. See how that pulls that plug right out? You have to pull that out of the piece of tubing, or it'll get stuck in there too deep and you won't be able to get it out. Ah, I got stuck in there. Some little bit did get stuck in there. Okay, that's not quite enough, so I'm going to add another couple of holes on the sides here. Sometimes it'll leave the plug inside the pot, like it's doing now. There we go. Now, because when you glaze a piece, it likes to it absorbs where the clay is the thickest. So the next thing I do is I take one of these, which is a countersinking tool for woodworking, and I countersink all these holes just a little bit, which will allow the glaze to flow away from the hole, and it's hopefully not plug the hole up when it's in the firing process. This is sort of something that I've learned from experience. Another thing you can do is you can put wax on the inside of the pot where these holes are, so the glaze won't adhere where the wax is, and the wax just burns off in the firing process. Another thing you can do is go from the inside after you've glazed it and clean the glaze out of the holes, which is kind of painstaking to try and get in there with something like a pipe cleaner or something like that to get the glaze out. You see how it's countersinking all those holes? It'll make it look a little neater too in the long run. But of course, once the spout's on there, nobody can see this side of the pot anyway. So it's just for a glazing, to help glazing. If anybody's timing me, you can see that putting a teapot together isn't like really something that's really quick. It's something you have to concentrate on, and do certain things at each particular step. Now, because I've gone in there and I've done that with the countersinking tool, it's sort of messed up the insides of all those holes. So I'll go in again with that same hole puncher, and I'll just clean them up a little bit, just to make sure that they're nice and smooth and there's no hindrances for the water to come through. So now I consider that step to be taken care of. Now I'm going to wet this surface, which will soften up the area where the scoring is. I'm not going to score this, because this is a softer piece already. And when I'm pushing it on there, it'll push it into the grooves here. Just sort of force it into the grooves as you're assembling it. Now I also have a little lump down here of extra clay. So before I do anything, I'm going to carve that out. There you go. See, that's fairly. So this is moist, and this is more moist than the body of the pot itself. So they will stick, because I've just wet this area. So now I've also, the way I cut this, I have sort of an imaginary center line right there, which I want to line up with the top of this, which didn't exactly hit that center line there. So the center line now is basically over here a little bit. So I want to line those two lines up See that? And that's about where I want that spout to be. Now basically you go through a process where you're using your thumb, I use my thumb, and I just push that onto the scored area. I'll do that all the way around. I'm right-handed, but I seem to do this procedure. I can do this part of it left-handed, and then I may switch to the other side and do the other side. Here, right-handed. You can see how soft that spout is because it's basically joining right onto the other clay without any difficulty. Now when I think I've got that on there as well as I can get it on there, I can either go around there and sort of smooth it off with my finger, or I can use a wood tool that will help me. But I'm going to do it with my finger today. See how that blends it in? Ta-da! Looks kind of funny because it's so long. So next I'm going to envision where I want to cut that thing off and cut it off at that angle. And as I said before, I've had like a few years of experience. So if I cut it too long, I can always cut it shorter. But if I cut it too short, it's very difficult to make it long again. So I'm going to cut it right about there. I'm going to leave it there for a while. It might be a hair long, but I'm going to live with it for a while until I get the handle on, which will help balance the pot out. You'll see that when I cut it at this angle, this way, I also cut it at an angle this way, because as the clay is drying and firing, when this was thrown, it has a twist in it because the way you're throwing it on the wheel, the clay is twisted. So this will twist in the drying and the firing process. It'll twist and it'll come out level, approximately. You can see that example here. That's fairly level. And that was also cut at an angle like this. I'll go in and I'm going to let it stiffen up a little bit before I go in and clean up the inside edge there and make it a little crisper, and get all that roughness out of there. But I'm going to wait for it to stiffen up. So I might not do that today. I might do that tomorrow. Now I'm eyeballing. This has a little less of a bump on one side than the other. What's going on here? It's not perfect. As you can see, there's sort of a flatness on this side, and more of a bulge on this side. So I'm going to eyeball straight back to this line here where I think that the handle would like to be. Maybe move it over just a hair to there. Now a couple of days ago I took clay and I pulled a handle, and it just kept my hands wet and kept squeezing and making it longer and longer. So I've made there's 5 teapots here, and I've made all the handles for the teapots ahead of time so that they can stiffen up as well. So I'll pick the first one. I like it, the first one. Okay, this is where I pinched it off when I pulled it. So see, I pulled it and I shaped it with my thumb to get this ridge down the middle, because I like the highlight of a ridge coming down the middle there. And it's fairly wide, so it's comfortable in your hand. So now, because I'm going to put this on here, it has a different angle. So I'm going to mimic the angle here on the handle. See, like that? So that's where the handle's going to be, right on there. So then again, I'm going to make a little mark, and I'm going to score that area where I'm going to put the handle so that it'll stick very well. And I'm also going to go straight down from that, because I want my handle to attach down here at the bottom near the foot, which will give it a broad enough, a broad sweep so that you'll be able to get your hand in there without any difficulty. So that's going to be directly down from this, in this area here. And I'm going to wet those 2 areas again, so it'll soften them up for the handle. I usually don't wait. I just immediately stick this on and get it going. I'll do it lightly at first. Then I'll figure out how far I want the handle to come down. There. And then I cut the excess off of that. Center that. And I just press that on with my thumb and my index finger. Leaves an indentation like that. Then I'll work on the top again and get it to be completely attached. I don't do too much up here, except for just press it into the wettened, the dampened, scored area there. I want the handle to sort of look like it's just growing right out of the pot. I don't know, but I like this sort of scoop angle there, sort of a drop and a curl. Next, I'm going to cut this off here. I usually use the scoring tool, and I just scrape off a little bit there, so it roughs up the surface. And I'll again dab that with a little water. And from my pieces that came off here, I'll make a little knob, thumb rest. I sort of preform that before I stick it on. Just like that. Now, one other thing I do is on the right side, which when it's standing up, this would be the right side of the handle, right on the foot rim, because the foot rim doesn't get glazed. I put my my H for Hampton Pottery. You always have to remember that when the pot's upside down, you have to put the stamp on upside down. Sometimes I've done it the opposite way. I stamp the foot rims so that when the pot is fired, the stamp doesn't get covered over by the glaze, because it would sort of obliterate it and you wouldn't be able to see it. This one's got a little bit of dust in it. So once that's done, that's the steps of a basic teapot. Now the teapot that I have on order is in this, somebody wants one in this glaze, but they want this effect on the outside, which is called fluting. So potters many years ago came up with this special tool, which is basically a piece of metal where they punched a hole inside and sharpened one edge of it here so that it'll create flutes. You have a little flute or a big flute. Now the critical thing with when you're fluting something is you have to had a preconception of what you're going to do with the teapot, because you have to have the wall thickness of the pot be thick enough so that when you're carving this much clay off of it, you still have enough thickness there to give you strength for the pot, and you don't cut through. I usually put this right on the edge of my, what I call a banding wheel, and I usually start right at the handle. Is this straight? That's pretty straight, okay. And you just put it up against the pot and you just drag it straight down. You want it to go straight down, because if you start creating a sort of you can get off if you go kittywampus. Now you can do two different things. You can do it very close to each other, which let me get an example. It creates a real point there and becomes sharp. See on this teacup, see how sharp it is right there? Because the fluting was very close to each other. And sometimes this feels okay, but I prefer, after experience, I prefer to do it just a tiny bit wider there, so it's softer. In the long run, it's softer rather than a very sharp edge there. You're trying to keep the same approximately the same spacing. You're trying to start at the same place on top, and if depending on how you made the pot, it should sort of fall off at about the same place on the bottom. I've never done it left-handed here. Hey, did you see that? That went right in my coffee. So that's what that's going to look like on that side. Now this other side, I'm going to start from the spout and go toward the handle. Because the reason I'm doing that is because I want this mark on this side to be about in the same spot on this side. Or if you go from the handle, it could be a little bit different, varied. So I'm going to start here and do it here because I want it right next to the spout. So those two look pretty much balanced there. that came out pretty good. So it's going to be just about balanced anyway. I'd like to say that you plant it that way, but it just sort of, I guess from experience, it works out that. Now later on when it dries, these little fuzzy things here will come right off. They'll flake right off. You can just rub your hand over it and it'll smooth it. And it'll also, when it's a little stiffer, this will be easier to clean up the inside of that hole without damaging the thing. So that's assembling a teapot here at Hampton Pottery. I'm in Chichester. I'm going to be part of the virtual fair. So we hope you can all join us. nhcrafts.org for the connection. Thank you.